This is Scenic Roots, Talking Writing. My guests are four very different writers and personalities with whom I have had a number of conversations individually. But this is the first time all four of them have been in the studio together. Helga Kidder, Cynthia Young, KB Ballantyne, and Rachel Landrum Crumble meet monthly with other writers to read each other's writing and talk about it. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to have them recreate one of those meetings on the radio. The first half played on Scenic Roots last week. This is the second half of what was a lengthy and wide-ranging conversation. This is Cynthia Young.
Migration it came about because with the tribe, I was trying to record their history. And just because it was so hard people are dying, like Helga said, all the time in our family. And when they die, they take their stories with them. Mm-hmm. And I felt like as a writer in the family, I needed to be one of those people that gathered those stories and recorded them for those who wouldn't. Like my youngest son does not know my mother. I find that fascinating because she had passed away by the time he was born. Mm-hmm. So to me, migration is, like Rachel said, it's a collection of the voices of even people I never heard talk, but I kind of did. Mm-hmm. So those poems are their stories.
I love the idea of the griot. This person is the repository of the history of the people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Seems like that's what you had in mind. Mm-hmm. Is that a difficult thing to assay? Do you find people are willing to be open with you and talk about things that you'd like to record about them?
No, it was terrible. My family is very private. I mean, There are things that are waiting to be written. This sounds terrible, but when my sister, who's older, goes to the next level of life, because she feels like this is not anyone's business. I mean, I think that like KB has helped me a lot, and that my sister was saying that you have to tell the truth, but KB was saying, no, you have to tell truth, but it's not necessarily...
It's emotional truth that you have to tell.
But yeah, it's hard, and they don't want their stories told. So everyone's pretty much gone now, except for my sister. So everybody's story is pretty much out there except hers.
Yeah, that kind of happens. I felt like I could never have published the book that I'm publishing if my mom was still living. But I needed to write those poems, and some of them were written before she took her life. But it was like that thing about keeping family secrets. Like, I can't talk about this yet.
So this is your time. This is the time that Sister Sorrows is supposed to come out.
Right? Yeah, I guess so.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm lucky that way. My family is in Germany, so they can't say anything.
Right.
Yeah, you give yourself permission. Yeah.
I guess it's pretty much impendent on the subsequent generation to record the previous generation. Because after that, it's as you say, your son can't do that. He doesn't. He would be third person as far as he's concerned.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And yet, nevertheless, even given that, people are still reluctant, still a little uncomfortable with it. But I think what KB said is, at least the way it hits me, is that it's not really about the details. I'm not interested in your private. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in your feelings and how you saw the world.
Mm-hmm. Right. Processing of it, experience.
And how did it look to you?
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect, I don't know if this is true, Cynthia, but I would suspect that what you'll see and read is quite familiar, that you don't feel that much differently yourself.
No, I don't. I mean...
No, you personally. I mean, anybody who, having been through that, where you look at what people who came before you were thinking and feeling. Mm-hmm. Is that true? Because we have that blood connection, do you think that it also means that we kind of see things the same way or not?
I think everyone has a different perspective. I mean, we could even grow up in the same family. Well, that's what happened with my sister and I. And she's like, that didn't happen. I'm like, it totally did happen. So we fight about things like that. But I have a poem which I cannot read because I don't have it, but it's called Cornered. And it's about an experience that we were standing on a corner and some guys came and I felt threatened by it. And she said, and she uses that poem as a example of you didn't feel threatened because there was nothing to be afraid of.
Oh,
And I'm like, okay, that's
Yeah.
your perspective of that
Yeah.
night. For me, it's burned in. I mean, it's like trauma. It's burned in my memory.
Mm-hmm.
You know how I felt that moment. I was very young, but I remember those feelings. That my sister can't write that poem because she didn't have those feelings.
Yeah.
So
You talked about that the last time we talked to each other.
probably she's traumatizing me.
Right.
And I think, in some ways, that's the hardest thing to understand about another person, what frightens them. Would you care to read one of your poems?
Yeah, trying to think. I think I want to read this poem about my grandmother because we were talking about grandmothers. It wasn't until I started doing research and my uncle, who's now passed away, he passed away last year, decided, I was looking at Ancestry.com and it was really hard to find my grandmother. And so I was talking to him and I said, this name, because my grandmother was my grandmother Teresa, but this name Theosa kept coming up. And I'm like, who's that? And he's like, how do you not know that's your grandmother's name? I'm like, because no one told me, And so that's where this poem comes from. Her name was Theosa. How simple a thing it's that to know ourselves as we are, we must know our mother's names. Alice Walker. In the family Bible, I discovered my grandmother's real name before she had to change it, not to be more American, but to be less of a Southerner, back when those who had just arrived from Georgia were looked down upon. Red clay dirt still under their fingernails, eyes still searching for greenery over this gray concrete and black asphalt. Theosa is a beautiful name, but the school kids acted like the melody was caught in their throats like fried catfish bones. So she changed it to a northern name that they could embrace more and bully less. Now all that was left was her longing for what her parents were glad to leave behind. Dense woods and forests where one never knew who they'd run into hanging from a poplar tree.
Wow, that's quite a conclusion. There's nothing in the poem up to that point that's
It prepares you for that.
Right?
Just like
life.
not being able to be prepared for that image
Right.
in real life.
Yeah.
apropos of what we were just talking about, to try to understand how it was to live at a time when that was a possibility. That must be difficult for subsequent generations, first to understand, and then second to wrap their heads around that.
Right. Oh, yeah. History is, I mean, there's like a new kind of, genre called like black horror. And basically, it's just history. It's not like you have to
Right.
step out of it and say, ooh, it's going to get scary. It's just
Yeah.
like doing history and it's scary. Yeah. And a lot of times, I have friends who can't watch or read, things about our history because it's just too traumatic.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
My husband's a little bit like
It's,
that.
it's understandable. That's how I'd feel, I think.
Yeah.
If I were a black person from the South, I wouldn't. Well, from my point of view, I talked to Earl about this a little bit the other day. This is obviously from the outside, but what I see is this unbelievably rich culture. Earl grew up in, I don't know if you know the story, he grew up in a fishing village in North Carolina. It was almost entirely white people. So when it came time for him to go to middle school, they bussed him out of the town with the white people to a school where they had mostly black people.
Interesting.
And he said, when I got there, they embraced me. The teachers embraced him and made him feel welcome and made him feel safe. So in the face of the horrors of the history of this country, there's that. The embrace of the culture, the music, the poetry, all of the writing and the expression, and also the emotional embrace. But it was difficult for you to write this stuff, wasn't it? You're having to confront things that you probably, like everybody else, you just as soon not think about it.
Well, in order to tell their stories, I was just trying to understand a lot that I didn't understand. Like we were talking about, when I was younger, I didn't understand it. So I'm from New York, New Jersey, and when I wanted to come to college, my family just like, what is wrong with you? Like, why would you do that? And it was in the early 70s, so things were really progressed a lot.
To this area.
Yeah, in this area. So they were terrified, and I didn't understand it. I understand it now, but I didn't then. It's like, I'm just going to college, Like, no, you're going to Tennessee. You're going to Georgia. And then I got to experience some of what they thought I would experience. So, and we left. Well, I got married, we left, and we went to California. I'm done for a while.
What interests me about how each of you write is that while on the face of that, it would seem to be very different, and your life experiences in some sense very different, they're not actually. Because if you drill down to the common humanity in your work, it's very apparent, whether it's Helga, who came here from Germany, or Cynthia from New Jersey, or Rachel from
Columbia, Maryland, before I
Maryland,
moved here.
yes,
Lived here
that's
the
right.
longest anywhere, though.
KB from Florida.
Florida girl.
Like, Richard, one cool thing, from what you're talking about, is I was writing a poem. My father's side is from Virginia, but so I've revisited that place and some other places where my family's lived down south, and just like feeling their spirit when I'm there. And when I was reading a poem I just written about that, and KB was like, I know that feeling, because when I go to Ireland, where I've never been, but I feel the spirit of my people there. So it's kind of, we had that connection, even though we're talking about entirely two different things, but we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that struck me when you were talking before, Helga, about the relationship with your mum, you had a similar experience to me, that you left home, and you really left home.
Yes.
And you weren't that old. You're, what, 21?
I was 21.
Yeah.
Yes. But I had never traveled. I had no knowledge of the language, of a different language. Came from a small town, 10,000 people in the Black Forest. But Chattanooga, at that time, when I came in 65, it was a very laid-back southern town, and it suited me just fine.
My understanding of the Black Forest is that is one of the more rural parts of Germany, and a lot more sort of family-centered culture than perhaps in the bigger cities.
Correct, yes. And so during the World War II, we didn't have really any destruction, but we had all the bad things that happened during wars. But we were lucky in that sense that we had no destruction, yes.
So in some sense, your experience was the obverse of Cynthia's when you came to Chattanooga. You said it's a sleepy little southern town. You felt comfortable here.
Well, I did, and I was very eager to learn the language and the people, the culture. Yeah, it just suited me. Of course, there were people who, by watching TV, especially younger people, they looked at me in strange ways. And actually, one little boy came up to me with his wooden rifle and said, I am shooting you. So, but I just laughed, It was not traumatic in any way.
I guess what Cynthia was talking about in writing that family history, you are creating a sense of you're grounded through that. Mm-hmm. You know who you are and who your people are. Mm-hmm. For Helga and I, these will never be our people, and yet they are, because we've been here.
Yeah.
You know, one of the most jarring things somebody will say to me is, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Where am I from?"
Right.
I live here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right down the road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually have people say, "Oh, you must be from up north. You have an accent." And I just say yes.
Oh.
I had people say that to me too, and I'm like, okay. You're a northerner, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
You grew up in Florida. One of my deepest fantasies growing up was to live like the boys on Flipper.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like idyllic. You know?
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
It's everybody in Florida's idea of living idyllically too.
Yeah.
It's not real.
I would think maybe the challenge, even to grow up in Florida, is that so many people are not from Florida.
Yeah, nobody's from Florida.
Everybody goes there to realize some sort of like me, to realize this fantasy of living
Mostly
in the
people who
sunshine and all
retire,
that.
Yeah. I think my parents are probably my immediate family is probably the only ones that I actually know of who were born in Florida, lived in Florida, you know, everything. Because my grandparents, one set was from Georgia and one set was from Ohio, and they moved to Florida, you know. So,
Yeah.
Where do the Irish ancestors fit in? Is that
my mom's people, yeah.
before your grandparents or
Yeah.
great grandparents?
Yeah. Well, great.
Great grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what, 5 generations? Is that right?
As far back as we can trace, but since the names are Smith and Ryan, it gets a little
Ryan,
it gets a little hopeless at finding any kind of family history.
Oh, shoot, you just embrace them all.
Right,
Oh, you're
exactly.
Ryan. Oh, you must be one of mine. So even though you were 5 generations removed, when you went there, you felt it.
I did. It was the most bizarre thing. You know? You just feel like, oh, you know, there's something here. I don't know if I had been to Scotland. I guess I haven't really had that feeling. I actually literally had that feeling of stepping on the ground in Ireland and went, whoa. But in the Highlands of Scotland, where the other side of my family is from, I didn't feel that touching the earth. I just felt it, you know, in the air. It was more like in the air. Like I would see the mountains, the Highlands, and I'd be like, my heart was like, that's where I need to be. I never get that feeling from a city, and I didn't get that feeling from the eastern coast of Scotland or Ireland. I mean, it wasn't like I felt that everywhere. There
Eastern
are places.
coast, right.
There are, like the Atlantic coast, that's where I felt it.
That's interesting, you know, if we are who we come from, that what your experience would certainly tend to suggest that.
Mm-hmm. I think probably everybody would feel that if everybody let themselves feel that. If they're in an area that is meaningful to their family in some way. But I think, like you said, the term that you've used before, the creatives, I think not everybody is willing to be open to that.
That's how you see it, isn't it, Cynthia?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I found out that I just went to New Jersey this summer, and my family, my aunts who are still alive, were telling me how much my grandmother loved the Atlantic Ocean. And, you know, and so I was thinking about that when you said that. Because I love the water. I mean, that's my place, happy place. And to find out that that was her happy place, I'm like, oh.
It's a nice connection.
Yeah.
What's your ancestry, Rachel?
It's Scottish, Scandinavian. I was trying to find a poem about that, but there's a little bit of from doing a DNA thing. there's a little bit of Slavic and like Eastern Slavic and around the Iberian Peninsula, so either Greek or I don't know. Yeah, I mean, could be around one way or the other. So yeah, so I've thought about that too.
Are you a person who would like to trace your ancestry?
I'm blessed with having family on both sides who has done that, who has been able to have the means to do that research and stuff. So I have a lot of good documentation about that. So that's a real gift to have that.
Is it reassuring?
Yeah, I think it does. Just and to have had the gift of not having history be so upheavaled for my generations that it couldn't be traced. That is a gift. And my grandfather used to sit us down and open up books that had pictures in it and say, now this is so-and-so and this is so-and-so. And he would give us the family catechism in our family, And it was, at the time, I squirmed a lot, but I still knew that it was amazing, So.
Well, it's valuable, isn't it?
It is. It's very valuable. And I guess, and felt the total dearth of that when I married my husband, African American, and they didn't have that, didn't even know beyond their parents, hardly knew their family, for them. I mean, that's just a particular family history and not indicative of African American, necessarily. But of course, that upheaval is there from slavery and so forth. But for them, it was that they didn't have a history of storytelling. So that's heartbreaking. Yeah.
Because they basically disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
I know. I keep coming back to this notion of you, and I think we're getting closer to what that really means. Is that it's who we come from. And
I found a poem that I could read, but I'd like to hear KB, one of her poems from.
I was just going to read one about a student.
That line from John Lennon, "I'm a child of nature." Looking at you, that comes to mind. Is that partly because you grew up in Florida, do you think? Is that a place where people spend a lot of time outside? No?
Air conditioning,
right?
No, I don't. No, I think nature came to me as an adult because I was a child who would stay inside and read. That's all I did when I was a kid. I mean, I didn't have any brothers and sisters, so I just, and when I happened to be the latchkey kid, I would come home. I would come straight home and read. So, wasn't anything else to do. So I think I appreciate nature. I probably first appreciated it from the inside, looking through a window, before I appreciated it any other way. So, but I have great family memories of, my grandfather taking us to the beach and, buying us ices, my cousins and myself buying ices for us on the way home. That was the treat. We'd stop at the 7-Eleven and, the trauma was always cherry or Coke flavored, So what a great, sometimes I think about that. What a great dilemma to have.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't get that, that experience. So I think a lot of people don't explore their actuals. I don't mean immediate family. I mean where their people come from, and what's important about that. I mean, I think it would explain a lot in how people act or their preferences or whatever about themselves that maybe they're trying to understand and they're either afraid to look or they just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Kate, you're going to read one of your poems.
I am. This is a blue ragged wind for a student. Sky stunned by the news, you will not be back. I stare into the blue, atoms dissolving, taking away the shape of you. Absorbed into Bryant's earthly coach, into Dunn's wakeful eternity, you have traveled a distance we cannot reach, robbed from us, the young man we knew. No noon sun can warm us from this cold rumor, no night more chilling than today's dawn, when a dragonfly darted over the lake, the sky in lonely flight, light broken and scattered behind. That's my nature poem for you.
You're so kind to be so generous with your time. I didn't realize I'm looking at the time and realize I've kept you a long time.
I can close with a poem that's a newer poem. It's not in Sister Sorrow, but last time when you and I talked, you were like, well, do you have any grandmother poems? And I was like, no, not yet. This is sort of inspired by that, though. It comes from a quote from Isaiah 62:12b, and you shall be called sought out, a city not forsaken. Whether you were born pissing and crying or blue with the cord that nourished you wrapped around your neck, or premature in medical distress so that your mama could only kiss you before you were whisked away to the NICU, unseen hands carried you, held you, washed away your filth, fed you, swaddled you, kept you alive, in harm's way but breathing still. Strangers have prayed for you, or ancestors around a heavenly throne. Stop slapping away those hands that still shield you. Even now, whether outcast or gathered, you are here.
So much fun. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
You're
us.
welcome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Helga Kidder, KB Ballantyne, Cynthia Young, and Rachel Landrum Crumble being so generous with their time. If you're interested in reading more of any of their work, information on how to find them on the web is on the website, along with these two programs from Scenic Roots. This is listener-supported public radio in Chattanooga.